Can the live stream now start? Thank you.
Excellent. Well, good morning. It's morning in the United States. I want to welcome you all to the Defense and Security Committee meeting. I am here in Dayton, Ohio, and I have always wanted to host the entire Defense Committee in my hometown, the namesake for the Dayton Peace Accords for Bosnia and in the Balkans. I just wish that the rest of you were with me instead of me being here by myself. I want to thank the staff and all of you for the ability that we've had to modify the manner in which we do business so that we can do this remotely. I do think that this has been working and that we've been able to come together and still have a dialogue. Hopefully we'll be able to do that over the next couple days. We normally, as you know, have the Defense Committee meet over 2 days. We're trying to limit the amount of time that you're going to have to spend online. So we're doing that in two-hour increments. And hopefully you'll find that helpful and worthwhile. Today we have the defense minister from Greece with us, who's going to be speaking. Of course, we had all wished that we could have been there accepting the Greek delegation's hospitality. During our meeting tomorrow, we have a panel discussion on the committee's main report, Russian military modernization, by Senator Perrin. Senator Perrin will be joined by Dr. Connolly, who will also present some of his own research on the topic. We will then review the committee's draft resolution, maintaining allied defense investment momentum after COVID-19, and then proceed to elections for committee officers. I'd like to call the committee to order and call the meeting open. And at this point, Ethan has some administrative issues to educate us upon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Turner. Just to remind all attendees that the documents for today's meeting and tomorrow's meeting will be available on the NATO PA annual session SharePoint, which you have access to, as well as here in Kudo on the screen to your right-hand side. There's a button for documents. Today is very tightly scheduled, so in order to make it through this agenda, I would ask that you keep comments as concise as possible. Thank you for your cooperation on that. To guarantee a seamless exchange of ideas, we also would prefer that you have a microphone or quality headset available. Our interpreters are available to us and they allow us to communicate effectively. And the best way that we can make this happen is that we have on both ends a good audio feed. I'm also going to remind you that the meetings, both audio and video, will be broadcast live via YouTube and shared on our various social media platforms for promotional purposes. If you would like to make a comment or a question, please click on Request the Floor button, which you should be at this point quite familiar with over the course of our meetings. Regarding voting, we just did a test vote. We will be voting throughout the day. Please know that your access to all polls during the DSC meetings is based on information provided to you by the NATO PA staff, from the NATO PA staff to your Secretary of Delegation. If you are eligible to vote in this meeting, they will have told you which email address to use when logging into this meeting. If you have not logged in with the correct email address, you must log out at this point and then log back in with the correct one. If you face any difficulties at any time during this meeting, please write in the operator chat, which is in the messaging section. A NATO PA staff person behind the scenes will do their best to help you out. And if you have a question about the voting process, you may also contact staff that is in charge of this voting process at vote@nato-pa.int. Again, that's vote@nato-pa.int. And with that, I turn it back over to our chairman, Mr. Turner.
Thank you, Ethan. We have a few items to address before we get to the minister's comments. First is a discussion on the elections that will be happening tomorrow. We have several positions open and have already received a number of candidates to fill them. If you would like to be a candidate for one of these positions, please inform Ethan by 6 p.m. today so that we can organize a vote. So far, for the Defense Committee, we have 2 vacancies for vice chairperson. Nicu of Romania and Utku of Turkey have expressed their interest in filling these positions for the 2 vice chairperson positions. In the subcommittee on future security and defense capabilities, there is 1 vacancy for vice chairperson. There is 1 candidate for this position, Pierre Hughes of Canada. In the Subcommittee on Transatlantic Defense and Security Cooperation, Jean-Charles of France, who has served the subcommittee throughout the year as the ad interim rapporteur since the retirement of Sir Nicholas Soames, has expressed his interest in standing for the full mandate in this position. Lastly, there are 2 alternate positions open on the Ukraine-NATO Interparliamentary Council. Mr. Friki Isaac from Turkey has expressed his interest in one of these positions. Again, if you have any interest in serving in these positions, please let Ethan know by 6 o'clock today, which will be the deadline. Next, I will ask the committee to accept the draft agenda for these proceedings today. We will also use this opportunity to once again test the voting system. So we will begin the vote on acceptance of the draft agenda. Members, please click on the poll on the right side of your screen and vote to adopt the agenda, to reject it, or to abstain. You have 1 minute to vote, and a clock will appear on the screen that will count down the vote. I'll ask Ethan now to conduct the vote.
Please start the timer. And everyone has 1 minute. Thank you.
Ethan, on my screen, I don't have a timer, so if you could tell me when the time is up.
20 seconds. Thank you very much. Please close the vote. Publish it, please. We are all set, Mr. Turner. It has received all confirmed votes. Thank you.
Excellent. So the draft agenda is now adopted. Next, we'll ask the committee to adopt the summaries of the 3 previous meetings. Excuse me, that would include our 2019 annual session in London and our 2 online meetings in July and September. So Ethan, if you would again conduct the vote on adopting these summaries.
Please launch the poll for the adoption of the summaries and the timer. Fifteen seconds left. Thank you. Would the NATO PA staff please close the poll? And announce the results, please. Thank you. We are all accepted. 13 votes in favor, sir. Yes.
Excellent. All the summaries are adopted. Next, we have the consideration of the comments of the Secretary General of NATO. We will now consider his comments on the resolutions adopted by our Assembly last year. Are there any comments on the Secretary General's responses on the resolutions? Does anyone wish to comment there? If there are not, we'll consider those
I see none.
accepted. We will move on then to the Minister of the National Defense of the Hellenic Republic. I'm very pleased to recognize the head of the Greek delegation, to both Marietta and to the Minister. Thank you both for your offer of hospitality. It's unfortunate we were not able to travel to Greece, but I want to thank the Minister for continuing his dedication to this session by appearing with us today. And with that, for his introduction, I would like to yield the floor to Marietta, head of the Greek delegation.
Can you please request the floor, Marietta, and I will bring you onto the screen. Should be coming up right now. Excellent.
Hello, Mr. Chairman, dear Mike, dear colleagues. It is a great pleasure that I introduce you the Minister of National Defense and a great friend of mine, Mr. Nikos Panagiotopoulos. Today in Greece is the National Day of Armed Forces. Global power balances are shifting and the liberal international order is increasingly under pressure. Additionally, with the boundaries between internal and external security becoming more fluid and the alliance's neighborhood increasingly unstable, cooperation has developed into one of the core roles of NATO. Dear Minister, I think members would certainly be most interested to understanding Greece's defense priorities in the NATO concept. With these thoughts, and with no further delay, I will now pass the floor to Mr. Panagiotopoulos.
Thank you, Marietta. Thank you, dear colleague. Mr. Chairman, Congressman Turner, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it's with great pleasure that I participate today to the proceedings of the 66th plenary session of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. I'm looking forward to discuss with you NATO's adaptation process, our defense priorities, and also developments in the Eastern Mediterranean and what they mean for my country, but also for the alliance as a whole. Of course, I would like to welcome you here in Athens in person, nevertheless, but due to COVID considerations, it won't happen, but let us use this video conference to the maximum in order to have a productive and fruitful discussion. Allow me first to begin by saying that every year on November 21st, as Madame Giannakou already mentioned, we celebrate in Greece the Day of the Armed Forces. It's a special day to pay tribute and honor to the men and women of our armed forces, those that serve our country. So, in a way, and direct threats to our country and to the wider region impose the need for Greece to maintain powerful, highly operational and well-trained armed forces with a strong and definitive deterrent element. Our mission at the Ministry of National Defense is to spare no effort that will make our armed forces stronger and more able to fulfill their mission in defending our country and safeguarding our sovereignty and sovereign rights. Also, to contribute to the NATO alliance. Dear colleagues, our accession to NATO in 1952 and our inclusion in the European Union later in the early 80s have been historic milestones in my country's effort to earn its place in the community of Western constitutional and democratic countries. NATO's Parliamentary Assembly is profoundly important in making sure that the Allies will continue to preserve their core values and principles, which became the bedrock of the NATO alliance. We can all agree that we live in turbulent times, in times of change, to say the least. I think it makes a lot of sense that I start with our views regarding the deterioration of the security environment in the Eastern Mediterranean region, which is regrettably unfolding since last March, but over the summer has entered into a new and very dangerous phase. My country has full respect for the principles enshrined in the North Atlantic Treaty, especially in the undertaking in Article number 1 of settling any international dispute with peaceful means and refraining from the threat of use of force in any manner consistent with the purpose of the United Nations. Contrary to these principles, the Hellenic armed forces were brought on high alert in early August in response to an unprecedented challenge to my country's sovereign rights in the Eastern Mediterranean, regrettably not by a third party, but by an ally. My government has made clear from the outset of this crisis that a meaningful and constructive dialogue between both countries, as so many friends and allies have suggested, including the General Secretary of the Alliance, Mr. Jens Stoltenberg, can only be possible when the research vessel and its escort of naval units had withdrawn. This indeed happened on the 12th of September. This allowed the NATO-led technical discussions for the establishment of the military deconfliction mechanism to move forward. These discussions successfully came to a conclusion, and the Greek government was willing to consider further discussions with the purpose of elaborating the details of this mechanism. However, before the beginning of these discussions and the exploratory talks at the level of the Ministries of Foreign Affairs, aiming at the delimitation of the continental shelf and exclusive economic zone of the two countries, this ally proceeded to an uncalled for provocation, in breach of the provisions of the deconfliction mechanism, with the research vessel resuming its operations in the same area, but this time much closer to Greek islands, to Greek territory, and with a full set of escort naval units sailing alongside it. This behavior is indicative of how words in support of dialogue are refuted by deeds. When we talk, I'd say that it's proper that we back up our talking with
Mr. Minister,
actions or no actions. Yes.
I'm very sorry to interrupt you, sir. We have lost translation because we cannot hear your audio very well. Is there a way you could have your volume turned up, please, sir?
Yes, I'll do that.
Thank you very much.
Is it better now?
Not really. Perhaps if you could find if you have a headset or if the volume on your system could be turned up a little bit, please, sir.
Okay. Any progress?
Sounds a bit louder. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Can we try a little more, just a bit more if possible? Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you for your patience, sir.
Oh, it's okay.
Perhaps if you raise your voice as well a little bit, that would assist with the volume, sir.
Okay, I'll try to do that. I think it's a little bit better now. I understand how important it is to get across.
I think
those that are
yes, sir. It's a little better, and I'm assuming we can roll with this. Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, let me resume from where from exactly. Well, I was referring to our allies' behavior that is indicative of how words in support of dialogue were actually refuted by deeds. And I explained that when somebody talks, it is proper that the talk is backed up by actions, or in this case, by non-actions. Otherwise, all the talk is not providing, actually is not proving very sincere and is indicative of the true intentions. Anyway, it affects this ally's credibility concerning its real intentions, this type of behavior. It also creates serious doubt regarding the added value of the deconfliction mechanism, as well as pursuing any further discussions, when in fact it has been cancelled before its application by the deliberate militarization of the area, following political decision by this government of this ally. Now, one simply cannot ask for dialogue on the delimitation of a zone, while at the same time tries to create a series of fait accompli in that same area. Now, Greece handled the crisis in August and is handling this one as well in a responsible and resolute manner, trying its best to act with restraint, but also with full operational readiness and determination. Unfortunately, these provocations come with a set of serious consequences, not only for the overall stability of the Eastern Mediterranean, but also for the unity and cohesion of the North Atlantic Alliance itself. This behavior obviously contravenes the commitment undertaken under Article number 1 of the North Atlantic Treaty, since it's not a peaceful way to settle a difference between allies and neighbors. On the contrary, it resembles gunboat diplomacy and has nothing to do with a peaceful resolution of differences at any rate. Despite these developments, we remain committed to dialogue with all countries in the broader region and certainly with all allies. But there should be no doubt that this dialogue, including the NATO-led technical discussions on the deconfliction mechanism, can only take place within the framework of international law and not in an environment of aggression, coercion, threats, and an evolving disinformation campaign. So I'd like to call this ally to immediately suspend its provocations against Greece's sovereign rights and contribute to both parties resuming their discussions in good faith as good neighbors. This appeal was also launched, I should say that, by NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg. He declared very succinctly, asking us to refrain, any side to refrain from any seismic research activity, but unfortunately this appeal has not yet produced any results. Now, let me turn on broader developments concerning NATO's deterrence and defense, and in relation with our own defense priorities. First of all, let me point out that my country remains committed in fulfilling the defense investment pledge guidelines, despite the obvious economic impact of the pandemic and the recent severe economic crisis that Greece faced a few years ago. We are determined to continue investing more than 2% of our GDP on defense, while the government's recent decisions to acquire additional high-end military capabilities will be conducive in us reaching the second guideline of 20% on investing on weapon systems acquisitions and covering some of our shortfalls related to the Allied capability targets. As far as the third guideline of contributions is concerned, we will continue to be present in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in the Balkans, and in all the Allied maritime operations and activities in the wider Mediterranean and the Aegean, within, of course, our means and capabilities. While the Alliance has often suggested that we should do more on missions and operations, I was obliged to point out that this is highly dependent on the national deterrence and defense needs, and on the fact that the Hellenic armed forces are called to remain on extended readiness, unfortunately, for the reasons I described in the beginning of our discussion. Now, illegal immigration stemming from the east and the south is obviously a major security concern for us. I'm sure that you can all recall scenes of the sudden influx of immigrants on the land borders between Greece and Turkey in early March. Thousands of immigrants tried over and over for some weeks to overrun the border crossings, to violate, I'd say, the borders of Greece and the borders of Europe at the same time. The Hellenic armed and law enforcement forces had to successfully withstand an unprecedented hybrid attack, with many of our European partners mobilizing swiftly and supporting us politically, all with means on the ground, thereby recognizing the very peculiar state of affairs back in early March. I understand that for some allies, dealing with migration flows rests mostly with the nations and their law enforcement agencies, and NATO has more or less no authority to get involved. I would argue that the pressure to European governments and societies in recent years by mass migration, its consequences in politics but also security, considering the potential links with terror cells, are all part of a reality which can hardly be refuted or challenged. It would therefore be very difficult to understand why NATO would skip altogether a subject with profound implications to our democracy and the cohesion of our societies. After all, the Allies have agreed that NATO has to address all threats and challenges emanating from all strategic directions. I was very clear in pointing out to a recent NATO ministerial the added security dimension having to do with infiltration of ISIS fighters in the migration flows, trying to find a way toward Europe through Greece. We have realistic expectations regarding NATO's role vis-à-vis migration. A successful model is obviously the Aegean Activity Operation and its deterrent effect. This is a model which could be further enhanced based on an agreement by the Council and supported by the willingness of nations to contribute with means. We also expect this security challenge to be addressed in SECURE's new operational planning design. Finally, let me share some ideas on NATO's ongoing reflection process, that is, the NATO 2030 objective. NATO is faced with a serious cohesion deficit. This should be urgently resolved. We can only strengthen the alliance's unity and cohesion if our policies lie within the boundaries of international law and good neighborly relations. It cannot happen any other way. At the same time, we should not hesitate to denounce opportunistic policies and unilateral actions which run counter to the alliance's purposes and ultimately hurt its cohesion. In this context, we should stick to the rule of decision-making by consensus. Majority voting would only create rifts among allies. It would also make it much more difficult to legitimize our actions toward our public opinion and the international community. If we want the alliance to maintain its gravity in the international scene, we should strengthen its political dimension. Thereby, we have to work with the European Union, which possesses an organization that possesses a broad range of political, economic, and military tools that are essential for strengthening security in Europe. To achieve this, we should break away from conceptual
Smartphone connected
to the past and make the best possible use of the joint declarations of 2016 and 2018, as well as the 74 common actions. All allies and European Union member states have to be fully involved on an equal footing with no discriminations and exclusions. Similarly, we should respect the decision-making autonomy of both organizations. Also, we should intensify our contacts with our 40 partners, including high-level invitations to them by the North Atlantic Council and by more visits of the latter to partner countries. It is equally important that we increase common training and exercising with them in order to strengthen their capabilities and boost interoperability. Particular emphasis should be laid to Israel and Egypt, whose cooperation is indispensable in our efforts to stabilize NATO's southern flank. Regarding Russia, finally, we believe that the dual-track approach has to remain our strategic compass. In this spirit, despite the existing obstacles, we should not quit from the efforts to revitalize the NRC, that is the NATO-Russia Council. In conclusion, I should point out that NATO's strength over time has been its ability to adapt and respond to existing, evolving, and new security threats and challenges. First, in the beginning, it was the Soviet Union. Later on, it was terrorism. Then it was Russia, China, cyber threats already, and tomorrow, fake news propaganda aiming to subvert Western democracy from within. That has always been NATO's greatest strength, and in that strength, we should all invest our efforts for a better future and a stronger alliance. Thank you very much.
Mr. Minister, I want to thank you for your comments and for participating virtually in this session since we were unable to travel to Greece. I think your comments are certainly going to cause a very lively discussion. Ethan has, I know, the list of those individuals who have requested to speak. If you would like to speak and ask a question or make a comment concerning the minister's presentation, please press your request to speak button, and then Ethan will allow you into the session. I think if we can take individuals in some sort of grouping, we can give the minister an opportunity to respond to them. Ethan, is there a queue that's been formed, or no one is currently requesting to speak?
Not yet, sir. Now we have
Not yet.
coming up. Yep, we have Ruxandra Popa, the Secretary General of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly.
Excellent.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me and see me? Yeah.
We
Okay.
can, yes, great.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Turner. Good afternoon, Minister. And thank you very much for this excellent presentation. Mr. Turner, when he opened this meeting, mentioned that he's calling in from Dayton, Ohio. I believe today is actually the 25th anniversary of the Dayton Peace Accord signing. And so I want to take this opportunity actually to ask a question about security in the Western Balkans and Greece's perspective on the situation in the Western Balkans, NATO's commitment to the Western Balkans, and the future of NATO's open door policy in the Western Balkans. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about this series of themes. Thank you very much again for being with us this afternoon.
Mr. Minister, your thoughts on the Balkans?
Yes, it goes without saying that we are very much for an added environment of security in the Western Balkans. I happen to believe that security, first of all, relies on two pillars in this corner of the world. First of all is an established NATO membership, and second of all is accession to the family of the European Union. And I believe those two conditions, should those two conditions be met, then the future will be brighter and more secure for all those countries involved in that region of the world who has seen its fair share of troubles and strifes historically in the past. Now the past is behind us. We have to look forward to the future. And the future for the Western Balkans, I think, consists of inclusion in the NATO alliance and the European Union. This will ensure that the best Western Balkan countries will earn their place in the family of Western democracies. Greece is first and foremost committed on establishing good neighborly relations with all countries. I think that we have a brighter environment in the Western Balkans as far as that is concerned. So let me once more reinstate and emphasize our commitment to stable and secure Western Balkans. And of course, we'll do our part by supporting all the countries involved in that environment toward finding their way to NATO, the European Union, and the community of Western democracies, by all means.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. And also, we want to note that there was a historic signing between Kosovo and Serbia to begin the normalization of their relationships in Washington just a couple months ago. Ethan, I believe that there are a couple members of the UK delegation.
That's correct. Yes, sir. We have Alex Shelbrooke, the head of the UK delegation, followed by Lord Campbell.
Good afternoon. Can
Alex, you have the floor.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Yep. Minister, thank you so much for a very thought-provoking presentation. I just listening to the question of your border defence from illegal migration from the south. Is your suggestion and intention that the Article 42 PESCO EU policy be used more as joint defence rather than the NATO alliance in trying to control illegal migration?
Well, first of all, I believe that Europe should be more involved in general. Unfortunately, the burden on dealing with the migration flows toward Europe has been placed on the shoulders of 2 or 3 countries, I would say. Greece, first and foremost, being what it is, you know, not hostages, but of our geographical locations. But certainly, you cannot change geography, can you? Then there was Spain and Italy, mainly the southern flank European countries that have shouldered the burden. So in my mind, inevitably, Europe has to be more involved as a whole in order to contribute with burden sharing among all countries, among all member states. If that had happened from the beginning, things would have been much easier with respect to the migration flows and the sorting out of all the problems that stem from it. NATO can contribute in maintaining a series of monitoring operations along the borders on the so-called frontline state of NATO territory. And in that respect, that's why I emphasize the importance of the Aegean activity operation. We need the eyes and ears of NATO to monitor migration flows toward Greece, and also check a little bit, maybe more consistently, on the trafficking networks that are actually taking advantage of the plight of hapless refugees and also migrants. And also, I would say that it would be very important for NATO eyes and ears to check whether there is any attempt to weaponize those unfortunate people in order to gain geopolitical gains out of this unfortunate activity. And that's what I think has happened these past few months. And it's important that everybody takes note of that. So, in order for us to plan and actually apply our response to these unfortunate situations. However, and in conclusion, it should be a combination of more engagement by European countries based on the concept of burden sharing and monitoring, and also the NATO countries whose abilities and capabilities in monitoring and supervising this terrain can only produce gains and better results.
Ethan, our next questioner.
That's correct. Lord Campbell from the United Kingdom.
Minister, thank you very much for your presentation. I wonder if I might ask you about your view, or more correctly, your government's view of NATO's strategic concept. As you know, the concept now says that we will use for deterrence both nuclear and conventional means. And that, of course, is related to the traditional domains of land, sea, and air. But of course, we now meet challenges, it would appear, from space, and of course in the cyber domain. Is it the view of the Greek government that we should be considering a revisal of the strategic concept to take account of these developments?
It certainly is. I think that the very nature of emerging security challenges and threats is the fact that they are always changing and evolving. I've already mentioned migration flows. I've already mentioned terrorism and terrorist networks infiltrating those migration flows, thereby giving a new dimension in terms of security challenges to those flows. There's also cyber threats and cyber attacks. There definitely is the fake news propaganda that is aiming at subverting Western democracies from within, and usually coming from autocratic regimes, and I need not mention any names now. However, the threat is there and it's very visible. And there's also the space domain, which is, I would say, the domain of the future with respect to NATO security planning and its presence there, and all the challenges, legal and other, that will come along with it. So I think it's imperative for NATO to adapt and evolve. And as I said in my conclusion, since this has always been NATO's strength, we must make sure that it remains to be NATO's main strength. The ability to recognize, assess any type of new security challenge and threat, and do whatever it takes to evolve and respond to that. So I would say, overall, I would adopt this holistic approach. We'd like to call it a 360 degrees approach, and it's an approach that meets the demands and the exigencies of any possible threat emanating from no matter where, all over, including the South. I think that the southern flank of the alliance is a very sensitive flank at this point in time because of all that's happening from within. And we must sure, above all else, not to jeopardize NATO's internal cohesion. That should be, I think, a foremost priority for us. And we just have to come up with the realization that it's under threat as we speak. So let's adapt, let's be realistic, and let's do whatever it takes to maintain the capability and adaptability of our alliance.
Ethan, I see we have Utku, our Turkish representative, who's asked to speak. Are there any other members?
Lord Campbell seems to be asking for the floor again. He may need to. He may want to ask a follow-on question.
Okay, Utku.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. I would like to salute you and all our colleagues in the committee. It's a pity that we couldn't meet in because of the face meetings next. Actually, I would like to not a question, but rather a comment. Nearly 1/3 or half of Mr. Minister, presentation was about Turkey, although without naming our country. Of course, bringing up the bilateral disputes at NATO is something we have always avoided, and we intend to continue doing so, even though some of our allies adopt a different behavior. Current tensions that Minister mentioned in East Med are caused, in fact, by the unilateral actions of both Turkeys and
Seems to be
There's some interruptions. I cannot hear any.
Can you hear me?
Sorry. Can you hear me? It comes and goes. I would like to hear you.
Sure. Shall I continue?
Yes, please.
Yes. From the outset, Turkey have been emphasizing the importance of a peaceful and equitable solution in the region without preconditions and without ignoring the rights of Turkey and the Turkish Cypriots. At the same time, Turkey have underlined that she will continue protecting both her own rights and interests and those of the Turkish Cypriots. And Turkey has always been open to dialogue, but the same cannot be said for Greece. And the provocations continue, including regular violations of the demilitarized status of the Eastern Aegean Islands and military exercises in the East Med. Turkey is ready, and we have repeated that we're ready for dialogue and cooperation towards a solution based on equity, where the legitimate rights of both Turkey and Turkish Cypriots in the East Med are secured. And we have been calling for some time a regional East Med conference, which could be an opportunity to generate an inclusive cooperation mechanism between all the actors. And the deconfliction initiative that you mentioned, which Secretary General Stoltenberg has initiated, we fully support this initiative, and this initiative should be utilized to the fullest extent possible in order to avoid incidents in the region. And we expect, it's a call from us to NATO and our allies to to encourage the dialogue in this region for peace, security, and stability. Thank you.
Well, I understand that there's no question, but let me make a few comments on what our dear colleague has said. Well, fine. I mean, we've never insinuated that we're against the dialogue process. On the contrary, we are very much for the dialogue process, and it is also my very firm personal belief that Greece and Turkey should be talking in order to reach an understanding, in order to resolve their differences. However, this dialogue should not be taking place under certain conditions, under conditions of coercion, under conditions of the deployment of the fleets of the two countries because of the exploratory vessel continuing its activity in disputed territories at the most, let's say, optimistic scenario. We for one claim that the territories where the Uruç race is sailing constitute elements of our constitutional self, of our continental shelf. I'm sorry. Turkey argues otherwise. Obviously, we have to do with a dispute. What do you do about disputes? You sit down and discuss them. You don't take out the fleets to face against each other. What do? You open fire? No. You sit on the dialogue table. At least that's what good neighbors and NATO allies should be doing. So let's just do that. But let's do that under conditions, well, friendly conditions and not confrontational conditions. That's all I'm saying. That's all the Greek government is saying. So in my mind, that's the way for the future. But you know, you cannot do that under this constant harassment, belligerent rhetoric, hostile declarations, provocative actions, this whole destabilizing behavior. Let's do this in good faith and according to the concept of good neighborly relations. Now, I've heard this argument about Greece not fulfilling its obligation of demilitarizing its easternmost islands. Well, I could argue all day about, say, the regime that concerns the two northeastern islands of Lesbos and Lemnos, which are bound under the Montreux Treaty, not under the Lausanne Treaty. I would argue for the Dodecanese being bound by the Treaty of Paris, which actually ceded them from the Italian sovereignty to the Greek sovereignty, and are not bound by any other regime. And even with respect to those islands that are bound by the Lausanne Treaty, well, I could argue for the continuous military presence, because the Lausanne Treaty doesn't say about a military force on the islands, but just excludes the construction of naval bases on these islands, which is a totally different thing. But nevertheless, I could do that all day. However, I will use one very simple argument for our need to keep a certain military presence of those islands. The fact that they are under military threat. And this fact is due to the reality that our ally maintains significant military forces across the Asian Minor Coast. Now, I don't understand what's the meaning for maintaining such a strong military presence across the coast, other than probably staking a future claim towards those islands. So we have to defend ourselves, we have to defend our sovereign rights, and that's fully compliant with international law, and under no dispute from anybody. The right of a country to defend its sovereign rights and its sovereignty is one of the most absolute rights in accordance with international law that there is, and that we intend to do. Now, if there's any change in the maintenance of military forces across from each other, yes, we're willing to discuss anything. But insofar as we face that direct presence, well, we have to do whatever it takes to defend our sovereign rights. And I think that's very clear.
Mr.
And,
Minister, we
to
have one more.
everybody concerned.
We have one more questioner. Ethan.
We have Jean-Charles Larsonneur from France who would like to take the floor.
And this will be our last questioner, Mr. Minister.
Minister, sir, thank you very much. Adhering to common values which we'll all share and the very high standards that all allies have also committed to are the foundation of our alliance. Thanks to these values, and together with motivated and very capable partners, we can make the Euro-Atlantic area, globally speaking, a space for security and for prosperity for ourselves and our neighbors. And firstly, I talk about cohesion, complementarity, burden sharing when it comes to investment spending, which are all based on 3 pillars: budgetary obligations, capability objectives, and cooperation. The commitment that was made in 2014 also calls for the need to develop interoperable capabilities and the need to implement such capabilities when necessary. In the field of operations, I think that this is particularly telling. I share your conviction. I think that in the past, NATO and the EU have always cooperated to protect human rights. Today, discussions are ongoing to ensure cooperation between Sea Guardian and IRINI. And this will be my first question. How can we make sure that these two organizations, NATO and the EU, can do more in the Mediterranean? Besides, when coming to capabilities, I think that the cornerstone is interoperability, which prevents us from having overlaps, creating synergies, and working with partners. We don't need to necessarily have the same military equipment. I think that the essence is to make sure that such equipments can use common services and that they can dialogue, they can be interoperable with other services that they are networked with. And this is my question: how does Greece ensure interoperability? And lastly, we know that the ministerial meeting at NATO is going to be held in the coming days. I think that a discussion towards reinforcing and strengthening cohesion internally at NATO so as to bolster political collaboration is absolutely paramount. Of course, consensus-based decision-making is a paramount principle within NATO, but we nonetheless face a number of challenges in this regard. What is your take on this?
Sir, before you begin your comments, I had said that'd be the last questioner, but Ethan, I do see that Senator Perrin has requested to speak. If we could have his comments and then close the discussion.
Yes, sir.
Senator Perrin, are you able to?
Bringing him up right now, sir.
Excellent. We'll have him be our last question.
Can you hear me? I don't know if you can hear me, but I cannot hear you. But I'm nonetheless going to ask my question. Minister, sir, good afternoon, and thank you very much for your presentation, which was indeed very interesting. I wanted to share a few questions with you. Firstly, I would like to know what the expectations of Greece are when it comes to the political reflection process that is currently being undertaken under the aegis of the Secretary General. We feel that in the current context, deconfliction groups and discussions are necessary. What is your take on this? And also, do you feel that working groups, of course, without questioning the consensus principle, which of course needs to remain the main modus operandi for the NAC, do you think that specific working groups for countries that wish to go further could be a solution? Thank you.
Well, I'll do my best to give some answers, even though my French is not as good as my English. However, I was able to figure out, I think, the general direction of the questions. Now, well, NATO is above all, I would think, a community of interests of a strategic nature based on on a commonality of values and ideas. So that's how it came about. For example, respect for international law, good neighborly relations, especially among allies, the need to defend and protect Western democracies from all types of security challenges and threats. Those are the ideas, the core political principles that brought together the members of the alliance. Now, all families have their moments of dispute and infighting. However, over time, and everything is taken care of. Those disputes are resolved in good faith among allies, and life goes on. So that happens also within the NATO framework. However, we should all stick to adhering to all those core values and principles, and believe that above all else, this is what binds us together. And if we do that, we'll have a bright future as an alliance and a success in dealing with all those types of new threats and challenges. We have to share. We have to shoulder the burden that fits each one of us. Unfortunately, such a military alliance needs to depend on burden sharing, on meeting targets, on investing on defense and technology, but mainly defense. And that's the only way to move forward. And also, we have to always be very aware to always be inquisitive in ways to reinforce our cohesion. Our French colleagues probably will remember an incident off the coast of Libya this past summer, when a ship of the alliance conducting a NATO, let's say, mission in trying to impose, to ensure the imposed arms embargo of Libya, was targeted by another naval vessel by a NATO ally. Now, this did not contribute much to reinforcing our internal cohesion. It led to let's say, a public incident among ministers. It led to inquiries and explanations being dealt left and right. It didn't contribute much to the cause of reinforcing internal cohesion within the alliance. So we all have to be very aware of the fact that these are very fragile balances being involved. And we all have to make sure that the balance is not upset. Now, what has my country done to contribute to the evolving strategy? Well, we're always there, coming up, actually discussing propositions, all propositions. We're always there trying to alert all members of the alliance to new security threats and challenges. We're always there trying to maintain the importance of safeguarding the southern flank. And we're always there in maintaining highly capable and present armed forces by contributing our share, despite all difficulties, especially those of a financial nature. So we're all trying to be, Greece tries to be the diligent foot soldier at the service of the greater alliance, but also by adhering to the main core values and principles that have created this alliance and brought it all along and will bring it to the future. So from each and every one of us, according to our capabilities and based on our core values, we always have to be diligent. We always have to be present. We always have to think about the future and cooperate with each other in good faith and according to the principles of adhering to international law and good neighborly relations.
Mr. Minister, I want to thank you for your comments and your willingness to take questions and be part of the discussion. We're all saddened that we weren't able to actually go to Greece, but we greatly appreciate in this virtual environment your willingness to join with us, and we look forward to additional discussions with you in the future. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll continue the remaining portions of the meeting. As you know, we have three other items on our agenda for today. One, we're going to take up our president's, Attila's special report on the role of NATO's armed forces in the COVID-19 pandemic. We'll then go to our rapporteur from Portugal, Laura's report on NATO's defense and related security capability building initiative, and then our ad interim rapporteur, Jean-Charles from France, and his report on key challenges to maintaining peace and security in the Western Balkans. And with our Secretary General's comment, it's certainly more important that we are taking this up today on what is an anniversary date. Attila made his presentation of his report on Wednesday, but yet we need to take it up today. I want to personally, in recognizing him, thank him for assuming the presidency. He's done an incredible job under what would be difficult circumstances at any time to step in to the presidency, but also in leading our body through this incredibly difficult time with COVID, so that we've been able to continue our operations and our dialogue. Until I want to recognize for any comments that you would like to bring your report today.
Well, actually, thank you very much for your nice comments. I don't want to add too much thing to this report, because it was a quite detailed debate last time. So we had several questions, so we could clarify all these issues. So I would like as it is. And thank you very much for the possibility. And of course, if there's any other question, then I'm ready to answer if I can.
Well, we are going to take an action to approve this report here in this committee. I don't see currently that anyone has requested to speak. Ethan, is that correct? That we do not have any additional comments on the report?
That's correct. Correct. And as such, could the NATO PA please launch the poll?
Mr. President, thank you again for your assuming those duties and at the same time shepherding through this incredibly important report about this very difficult time that we're all in. As Ethan has said, if members could begin the voting process, we'll adopt the report.
Can now close the poll, sir.
Excellent. Ethan, can you report the results?
I can. Could you please publish the results for me? Thank you. I don't see them. We have an adopted report, sir. All votes in favor. With one
Mr.
abstention.
President, again, thank you. And thank you for your service, and the report has been adopted. We will then turn to Laura from Portugal, our rapporteur, who has a presentation on her report, NATO's Defense and Related Security Capacity Building Initiative. Laura, if you would please request to speak, we can yield you the floor for your presentation, and then also address questions and discussions from members as they indicate their interest in speaking.
She's coming up right now, sir.
Excellent.
Hello, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to be at this meeting. I'm sorry that we cannot attend to Greece, and to have this meeting would be very interesting to be at Greece at this time. Unfortunately, the pandemic didn't allow us. And before I present my report, I will also like to note that I received a few amendments to the report from the Turkish and the Ukraine delegations. There are principally minor edits that do not impact the substance of the report in a significant way. But there is one instance where the amendments overlap in paragraph 47, and I will accept the Turkish amendment to simply delete the last sentence of this paragraph, and I will quote the sentence is Russia also supports another potential separatist region of Moldova, the autonomous region of Gagauzia. With that, I would now like to start my presentation unless there are any objections to it.
Excellent. Please proceed.
Okay, so dear colleagues, I would like to begin to thanking everyone for joining our virtual session during these extraordinary times. And despite this global pandemic, our assembly continues to work to strengthen the transatlantic cooperation and reaffirm our shared commitment to our common values. This updated draft report reflects the discussion we had during our July meeting, as well as the various amendments submitted by the delegations. I should also highlight that NATO officials directly involved in formulating and implementing the DCB initiative helped with research for this report. Their close and practical knowledge was essential in shaping the final outcome, and I was grateful for all of this assistance. Colleagues, our committee's special report made it clear that NATO has played a vital role during this pandemic. Allies have not only been supporting one another, but they have also been finding ways to support the regional partners with critical medical supplies. Crisis relief efforts today constitute just one of the many vital links NATO allies have formed to engage in cooperative security with our partners. Long-term engagement, however, flows principally through helping partners building capable and sustainable armed forces. Allies firmly believe these efforts help not only partners' forces become more effective and interoperable on missions and in operations, but also at maintaining peace and security at home and in their own regions. NATO's defense capacity building efforts are essential to allied efforts to project stability. This report highlights NATO's defense and related security capacity building initiative announced at the 2014 summit in Wales is a key pillar of these efforts. The necessity of such cooperative security programs has become all the more evident since 2014. A revisionist Russia has moved to challenge European peace and security via its intervention in Ukraine. Also, the Middle East and North Africa continue to reel from significant security challenges, extending from civil conflicts and terrorist group violence. The knocked-on effects of such security developments in NATO's near neighborhoods impact allied security directly. To help key partners in NATO's near neighborhood, the DCB initiative works with selected strategic partners to make their defense institutions and armed forces more robust, capable, and resilient. Strong neighborhoods, in line with NATO's broader security goals, will expand the area of peace, stability, and ultimately prosperity. NATO awarded the initial DCB package for Georgia and Jordan in 2014, Moldova and Iraq in 2015, and Tunisia in 2018. Each package is focused on the unique characteristics of each strategic partner. One nation, one plan is a term used around NATO to present the tailor-made and demand-driven projects. DCB package include the provisions of comprehensive strategic advice, force training, as well as other specialized assistance, such as on how to integrate, maintain, and deploy specific military equipment. First, we should demonstrate a strong political support at the parliamentary level for NATO's DCB initiative. Cooperative security outreach must be considered an essential function of our collective defense. Clear and present dangers proliferate around the alliance neighborhood, ranging from Russia's incursions in Georgia and Ukraine to the ongoing conflicts in Syria and Libya. Second, the NATO Parliamentary Assembly should find avenues for closer cooperation with NATO on DCB package. As NATO parliamentarians, we have the knowledge and expertise to offer value added contributions. For instance, we are well positioned to share best practice on parliamentary oversight to the armed forces. Nations' military forces should serve the interests of all the citizens and in their composition reflect the diversity of the nation. Third, our report requests greater transparency from individual allied governments on their bilateral security assistance with NATO DCB recipients. Better information sharing would allow for greater program efficiency and help avoid unnecessary duplicated efforts. Fourth, support for the DCB initiative must be maintained as a strategic priority. Each of the current bilateral DCB package is critical and strategically relevant. Each partnership deserves continued political backing and, to the degree possible, financial support from all allies. Fifth, our report expressed support for renewed attention to the current DCB package. In Georgia, the report advised efforts to look for ways to expand the breadth and depth of existing security cooperation in line with supporting Georgia's continuing NATO membership aspirations. The report also advises even closer partnership with Jordan, an oasis of stability in the greater Middle East region, overwhelmed with conflict, and a continued focus on Tunisia, which remains a beacon of burgeoning democracy in North Africa. In addition, the report advises also looking for expanding cooperation with Iraq, a country at the strategic crossroads in its efforts to rebuild after years of devastating conflict. Moldova also remains a valuable partner for the alliance. Continued security sector reforms in the country are vital to the nation's broader efforts at democratic institutional reforms. And finally, the report strongly encourage NATO to consider a future DCB package for Ukraine. The report welcomes the North Atlantic Council's recent recognition of Ukraine as an enhanced opportunities partner. This new partner status allows Ukraine to increase its participation in such things as NATO exercising, intelligence sharing, and political consultations. Complementing the NATO-Ukraine partnership with DCB package would dovetail with Kiev's attempts to modernize and strengthen its defense institutions. More linkage between NATO and Ukraine would help Kiev push back against Russia's hybrid warfare. And further, a DCB package for Ukraine would contribute to deterring Russian efforts to militarize the Black Sea region and potentially interfere with Allied freedom of navigation there. So, colleagues, I'm grateful for your kind attention to this summary of our report. I hope that my presentation gave you some food for thought, and I expect that you find our recommendations both meaningful and actionable. And I would like also to thank to Ethan for all his help in this report. Thank you very much.
Mr. Turner, if you could request the floor, please, we'll bring you back up as soon as you do so. having a brief moment here where our chairman is off the screen. It seems he may be having technical difficulties. Mr. Turner, if you can hear me, could you please request the floor, sir, and we'll bring you back up as soon as possible. Thank you. Laura, we'll bring you back up. Laura, please request the floor, and I will, in this instance, move to the first questioner for Laura. Oh, Mr. Turner's here, so let's bring him up. Jaylee, thank you very much.
Laura, sorry about that. I lost total
okay.
internet here on this Saturday morning at the office. Luckily, though, they were able to bring me back. Thank you for your presentation. This is obviously a very important topic, especially since the varied nature of the different countries in which the program has been implemented. You have also highlighted in your report the fact that that in addition to seeking security sector reform, there's also political instability in many of the nations upon which there's a partnership. Ethan, I see that we do have questioners and people who wish to join the discussion. Would you like to begin recognizing our members for questions for Laura?
Yes, sir. First, we have Camille Aydin from Turkey.
Dear President, Ethan, and the rapporteur, a good friend of mine, Laura, and the friends, all colleagues, I would like to salute all of you from the other side of the Aegean Sea, from Ankara. And I would like to confess that I missed you a lot. And I would like to thank Laura, honestly. I would like to commend our rapporteur for our excellent work she had done. This report is a comprehensive work and surely will be a guideline in our Assembly's future work. As our rapporteur has received a few days ago, I submitted 4 tiny little changes to the report. All of these amendments aim to correct and clarify some information, but if I'm not mistaken, I have already heard that they have been accepted by Laura kindly, and honestly, I would like to repeat my thanks again, because these are very minor corrections anyway, writing things. And thank you, and good luck from now on. Thank you.
Ethan?
Next, we have Colonel Bob Stewart from the United Kingdom.
Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, sir. Nice to see you.
Laura, thank you very much for your report. Very interesting. You mentioned just now your interest in NATO thinking about relationships in the Middle East. You specifically mentioned Jordan, I think, and even in Iraq. In what way, the UK has pretty close relationships with Jordan, as you probably are aware, and also a lot of us have fairly close relationships with the Iraq regime too. In what way do you anticipate NATO cooperating or working with countries in the Middle East, partnership for peace type relationship or something closer? How do you anticipate it working out? Thank you.
Laura, if you would.
Yes, thank you. Thank you
you're
very
recognized.
much. First of all, I would like to thank my friend Camille for his words. And it's always important to have suggestions, amendments from all the delegations because they enrich the report. So I thank you very much. And as I said before, they will be introduced in the report. So thank you. And also, my friend Bob, thank you very much for your question. It's a very interesting question, and it's a difficult question. But I would say that as we see in this report, this initiatives where we can increase exercising, where we can help these countries to share also intelligence is very important. So I would say that these are areas where we can increase the cooperation with the Middle East. Also, Jordan has excellent armored forces and ready to work with allies. We went to Jordan, I think, 1.5 years, and it was very interesting to see the work that they have, particularly the special forces. And it's very clear the importance of cooperating with Jordan and all the work that has been done through the years. So thank you very much, and I hope we can talk about these issues sooner personally. Thank you.
Ethan, is there anyone else who wishes to speak on this report?
Yes, sir. We have Andrew Wallace from Australia who would like to take the floor.
Excellent. Andrew, if you'll take the floor.
Good morning from Australia. It's 1:21 a.m. here, so I'm trying to keep my voice down so I don't wake my family, so pardon my whispering. Just further to Colonel Bob Stewart's question, I recently had the privilege of being in Afghanistan about 12 months ago, where I met with President Ghani, and he was very concerned about the drawdown of US forces and coalition forces from Afghanistan. And I'd just like to get your thoughts on where you think NATO has a role to play, given that President Trump wants to see all US forces, or the very significant proportion of US forces, withdrawn by January next year. Thank you.
Andrew, I'm assuming you're directing that to myself rather than Laura. If I can just give you some perspective, that there's a significant amount of debate that is going on in the United States, as there is also significant opposition to a drawdown, both in how it might affect the security situation in Afghanistan, but also in Iraq and the security situation that would unfold also, that would put our troops perhaps at risk. So I believe there is going to be ongoing discussion. We are currently both in the House and the Senate trying to engage the administration in that discussion, and we'll see how that policy unfolds. I know the incoming Biden administration has not yet fully made known what their position will be coming in January, but we're certainly hoping that there's no irreversible actions taken as the new administration comes in, so that we can look to what their policy might be. Laura, did you want to add anything to that?
Just I would add that we as allies went into Afghanistan together, and I believe that we will leave together also. So with that, just that. Thank you.
Excellent. Ethan, any other comments?
No, sir.
There's no one. We'll close the comments at this time. Laura, excellent work on your report and excellent discussion. We're now going to vote for the adoption of the report. Ethan, if you would begin the poll on voting for the report, we will hopefully adopt the report and move it forward. Ethan, we can't hear you.
I'm sorry, sir. We do have a few minutes, and there is another question. Would you like to take that, sir? Or would you like to move to the vote?
Okay. Excellent. If someone else is, and then after this one, we'll close it.
From Algeria, I believe, Jazair, right? Yeah.
Bonjour pour certains.
Yes, so good morning or good evening, depending where you are. The question I would like to ask is about the type of partnership which you would like to have with Algeria, my country, and perhaps also what you could say about Tunisia. Thank you.
Laura?
Yes, thank you. So I would say that we would like to have more cooperation with Algeria. That's something that it would be very important. And we know that it's up also to the Algerian government to determine it. So we hope that they engage with NATO and that we could have more cooperation in the future. Regarding Tunisia, we have at this time the DCB, and it would be very important to strengthen also the partnership that we have. So I would add these 2 points. Thank you.
Excellent, Laura. Thank you. Thank you for this discussion and the report. Ethan, if you'll open then the polling for the adoption.
So the polling is open. Let's just put on a 30 seconds since it's been open for a little while, and then we can move forward.
Excellent.
Okay, could we close the poll, please, and publish the results as soon as you're able to do so?
Ethan?
We have 23 votes in favor, no abstentions and no votes. So report passes.
Excellent. Laura, again, thank you so much for your work
Thank you.
and your excellent report.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we're going to turn to Jean-Charles and the report, Key Challenges to Maintaining Peace and Security in the Western Balkans. Again, it's timely that we're taking this up, as our Secretary General indicated, the anniversary today. Jean-Charles, if you would be requesting to speak, we will bring you onto the floor and look forward to both your presentation and the discussion. The floor is yours.
Merci, cher président Turner, cher Mike. D'abord, permettez-moi de vous féliciter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Turner. Thank you for all of you for the results of the election. So I'm delighted to be able to present the updated subcommittee report on peace and security in the Western Balkans. And I have been able to take on board the edits and suggestions that have been made during our discussion in September. I have included also a number of written amendments that were sent by your delegation. So I would like to thank you for all these amendments and suggestions. It is always useful to have these discussions. I have also received quite recently amendments from the Serbian delegation, also from the Ukrainian delegation, and also from the US. All these last-minute amendments can, of course, be taken on board, included in the report, so we can discuss this at the end of the meeting if necessary, but no difficulties. I would like to thank the International Secretariat and Ethan, who have worked very hard to ensure that we could have this document available in both languages. So we met virtually 2.5 months ago. Since then, there have been major changes in breakthrough agreement between Belgrade and Pristina early September, which holds the potential to unlock new economic normalization opportunities between the two parties with a new basis for mutually beneficial economic exchanges and help all the stakeholders see that cooperation, it paves the way to a more prosperous future. Negotiations held under the aegis of the European Union between Belgrade and Pristina were also a very positive development with the 5th round at the end of October in 3 fields in particular: economic cooperation, displaced persons, and disappeared persons. So it is clear that for the Western Balkans, a closer Euro-Atlantic integration is clearly the priority and the goal. NATO and the EU, through their commitment, have laid the foundation for peace and prosperity in this region. Each of these two organizations had played a crucial role to help this region leave behind its war-torn past and head towards a new future. Membership of NATO and the EU remains a strong goal. NATO welcomed its 30th member, the Republic of North Macedonia, in March. Serbia has stated it wants to remain neutral, but it is a strong partner. And in any case, all of these countries are clearly either candidates or partners of the two organizations. Bosnia and Herzegovina is also working on its prospects to also further its integration. The security implications that we have seen in the past and for the future remain to ensure proper stability and peace. The main challenge which we have inherited is clearly the dispute between Belgrade and Pristina, but we now see more efforts being made. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, there are possibilities to try to overcome the blockages. For the first time now, there will be local elections in Mostar on the 20th of December. This is a major sign, and there were also local elections on the 15th of November. All this shows that voters want change and that they are rejecting corruption and all what has been inherited from the past. We see, however, some worrying trends in this region with difficulty in pushing forward democracy and the rule of law. And of course, economic stagnation is making it more difficult to achieve progress. And in particular, the young people are pushed towards migration, seeking a better life. And at the same time, a weak rule of law has turned this region into a hub for all forms of trafficking. We see that there are various vulnerabilities in this region which are exploited by various actors. We also see the influence of external actors such as Russia trying to undermine the Euro-Atlantic values. Russia continues to consider that it can use the situation to its benefit, and China is also investing heavily in this region to included its in Belt and Road Initiative and also to try to expand its security cooperation. As mentioned in the DSC special report, COVID-19 has had a major impact in the entire region. Allies, however, have been quite swift to bring emergency medical and financial assistance. The European Union was able to provide more than 3.3 billion euros for immediate requirements in May, and a new package in October of 9 billion euros in investment loans. NATO and the EU have also been swift in countering disinformation campaigns coming from both Russia and China and targeting this region. So these strategic communication efforts have also been very important. As we had discussed in September, This revised draft report needs to reflect the continued strong commitment by all allies towards the Western Balkans. It shows that more needs to be done to help this region in overcoming remaining hurdles towards lasting peace and prosperity. And to conclude, I would like to recall the main recommendations. First of all, that the international community needs to continue to ensure proper functioning of institutions in Bosnia-Herzegovina. The Dayton Agreement was meant to be only a starting point. Now, a quarter of a century later, we need to think of a new national contract, so perhaps Dayton II. And I think that we need to welcome the new dynamic which has been given to relaunching the dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina. The efforts that have been deployed have led to high-level talks with a view to exploring new avenues for political normalization and society. NATO parliamentarians can certainly support these efforts. NATO and the EU need to cooperate with their partners to ensure that the rule of law is not eroded, and to help with transparent democratic institutions in these countries. Given the huge challenges from corruption to economic stagnation, efforts need to be made to ensure a strong, fair, inclusive rule of law in the region. And here we need to be able to rely on willing and capable partners in the region. Respecting our common standards and common values will ensure that we can strive towards the values of democracy, the rule of law, the respect of human rights.
You said, please, sir.
Sure.
So, as I was saying, respecting our common values and the criteria which we have set for all applicant countries, this is the basis on which we can act together with countries that are motivated and able to ensure that this broader Euro-Atlantic region be a safe haven for democracy, the rule of law, human rights, and the free exchange of ideas, people, and goods. So, NATO parliamentarians can here bring a very useful contribution, as has been the case during the past decades, working with parliamentarians of the region to build together a brighter future for the citizens of all this region. So I am now open to any questions, and of course we will be delighted to hear from our colleague Mike Turner.
For your presentation and for your recognition that Bosnia-Herzegovina needs the international community's assistance to make that transition from the 25 years ago Dayton Peace Agreement to a new governing structure and perhaps a Dayton II. Also, you've recognized the accomplishments that we've made together as a NATO community with the addition of Montenegro and Northern Macedonia. And of course, we all celebrate the steps that have been taken between Serbia and Kosovo that can help us find hopefully a broader resolution in the region. Ethan, at this point, if we can turn to our questioners and those who wish to make a comment.
Certainly. We have Juozas Olekas, former member from Lithuania, but who is now a member of the European Parliament, who'd like to take the floor.
Thank you, Edan, and thank you, Jean, for very, I think, interesting and very deep report. I fully agree with you that it's very important for regional stability, the membership in the EU.
Juozas, you would have the floor.
Do you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. First of all, thank you very much, Eugene, for a very interesting and very informative report. And I fully agree that for stability and peace in this region, it's very important the membership of Western Balkan countries in the European Union and NATO. And I indeed agree that it was very important to our support for these countries in the pandemic situation. But my question may be a little bit deeper. What we can do as parliamentarians, you mentioned NATO parliamentarians, how we can do more deeper input to support them. The time is not very good, the pandemic, but more common events or maybe in remote form, but to support, to implement the rule of law, the human rights and others. I think it's need more our common collaboration in the parliament and parliamentarians level. Thank you very much for your answer.
Ethan, I see that we only have 2 other questioners who've indicated they wish to participate in this discussion. If we could go on to them before Jean-Charles responds, as I see we are coming closer to our concluding time.
Yes, sir. First, we have from the UK, Colonel Bob Stewart, and after we'll have Dragan Somas from the Serbian Republic.
Jean-Charles, thank you so much for your report. Very interesting. It's really nice to see you again in the screen anyway. As a former British UN commander in Bosnia, I'm very, very interested in what's happening there. Can I ask, sir, how you assess Bosnia-Herzegovina's path, its efforts to try and be a NATO member? How are they doing? Because I visited them recently, and to be honest, I wasn't that impressed.
Ethan, turning to our next questioner.
Dragan Somas from Republic of Serbia.
Dragan, you have the floor.
Hello?
We have feedback.
Perhaps if Dragan, can you try again with your mic, and we all can mute ours? That might be causing the echo.
I don't know. Hello.
Jean,
Hello.
okay.
Hi, Mike. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Mr. Rapporteur, thank you very much for your very, very good work. We send you that on paper. You mentioned that earlier. The delegation of Serbia welcomes the NATO Parliamentary Assembly interest in the Western Balkan region and the rapporteur's effort to draw up the report. In our opinion, the report is based on the factual situation and very much reflects the real situation in the region. Wishing to make the report even more fact-based, we submitted to rapporteur some comments and information. So far, this kind of our contribution, Serbian contribution, always was acknowledged. We hope today everything will be the same. One thing we must mention, the NATO maintains a position of neutrality on the question of Kosovo and Metohija status, and therefore we believe that this should be reflected in the report, which entails that Kosovo should be referred to as an independent country. I understand that the rapporteur was from the country, France. France recognized independence of Kosovo, but several countries of NATO don't recognize independence of Kosovo. We have Brussels agreement, we have dialogue, we have Washington agreement, and please help us please to finish this dialogue peaceful way, but on this way, like NATO do, finally allow us to know that this report, just like most reports, use some non-governmental organizations' reports as sources. Not only you. This is this is the situation from several years and several reports. We believe that official sources should be used, such as an official NATO sources websites, where, for instance, in the news on a meeting of the NATO Secretary General, there is no reference to Kosovo Prime Minister Hoti, but rather to Kosovo Abdullah Hoti and Secretary General Stoltenberg meeting. It's very important for us in Serbia to finish this dialogue and to become a member of EU and to finish this dialogue successfully. Please help us, dear colleague. Thank you.
Dragan, thank you. Appreciate your comments. Jean-Charles, if you could respond to all of the questioners. After your comments, we will then proceed to
Oui,
accept
s'il
the
vous
report.
plaît,
Jean-Charles.
Monsieur le Président. Merci. Merci, merci mes chers collègues.
Thank you, colleagues. I will answer the questions in reverse order. I will first start with the question from Mr. Sormas from Serbia. I would like to first acknowledge him and thank his delegation for the amendments and the comments that they sent out to me. Indeed, I feel that it is important to stick to agreed NATO language on certain bits and pieces of the report where the language could have been interpreted as something that is not in line with the spirit of the report. For example, when we talk about borders, I suggest that we talk about cooperation in the field or some agreed language that we will find with the International Secretariat on all issues that are not problematic. I can reassure you we will find a solution and a way forward. I also noted the very interesting comments that were sent out on the mini Schengen that was started in 2019, which is starting to bear fruit, and I can assure you that we will add a mention to the mini Schengen process. And thank you for your comments. On the question of Bob Stewart, who is very familiar with the region, very pleased to see you again, although virtually, Bob. Yes, indeed, the situation in Bosnia is indeed still very much strained and concerning with relations between the different communities that are still challenging. Things are moving forward, but slowly nonetheless. I have flagged the progress that were made in the electoral reform, of course, in the report, but the country is still riddled with corruption and other problems, and I feel that all parties are making efforts and progress to converge towards the integration process, but with the constraints that we are all familiar with, and it is our role to support all parties to overcome these difficulties. And then lastly, Mr. Olikas, we had a slight problem with the connection, but I feel that the question dealt more precisely with what we can do as parliamentarians, member of the NPA, in this most challenging period, of course, with COVID. I think that interpersonal relations are, of course, more difficult to establish. Nevertheless, meetings such as this one today are a good platform for dialogue. And of course, we endeavor to continue to engage with other delegations, be it during meetings such as this one or using other avenues, and we must continue to do so. And of course, any support in this regard, be it from the EU or other allies, is important. Thank you.
Comments. Seeing no other requests to speak, we're going to take the poll to adopt the report. Key challenges to maintaining peace and security in the Western Balkans. Ethan, if you would begin the clock and open the poll, we'll ask the committee to accept Jean-Charles' report.
As the chairman said, please launch the poll and start the clock. Okay. Could the NATO PA staff please stop the timer and publish the results for us? Thank you. We have 24 votes in favor, no votes, and no abstentions.
Well, the sad part about being virtual, Jean-Charles, is you won't be able to hear the applause of those who are appreciating both your work and the acceptance of your report. So thank you very much for your contribution.
Merci à vous. Merci à tous.
Excellent. That actually concludes our agenda. Ethan, I don't think we have anything else to do today. I will then remind everyone that we will again come together tomorrow at the exact same time, whatever time zone that you're in. I'll be greeting you again from Dayton, Ohio, and we have on our agenda the Russian military modernization challenges ahead for NATO allies report, and then also elections. I hope you all have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you and having the discussion tomorrow. Ethan, thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, everyone.